Class of 2000. So one of the unique things about the class of 2000 for our female students was that was the first year that they resided in Mother Teresa Hall. So the girls before that used to reside in Edith Hall. Anyway, Kristi's a 3-year hound. She's a teacher at Muskowgan First Nation. She teaches grade 2, so you can see her little classroom stuff there. Even though I think her students are online, so she's all alone in her classroom. She's married. She's a mother of 2, and one of the unique things about Kristi is her mother is her principal, so she gets to work with her mom, which is kind of a neat thing. And so she's going to share. I asked Kristi to share a little bit about kind of an ideal Notre Dame experience from her perspective. So I am going to turn it over right now to Kristi. So hounds, give her your ears and your eyes and your full attention. So Kristi, welcome.
Okay, good morning. Thank you so much for that introduction. So as Rob mentioned, my name is Kristi Isnana'00, but everyone calls me Kristi. I first went to Wilcox in the fall of '97. I was 15 years old when I went there. I'm a Saulteaux woman from the Muskowgan First Nation, which is about an hour and a half north of Regina. So roughly, not quite 3 hours from where you guys are. I stayed in Wilcox for the next 3 years. I graduated in 2000. I should say I barely graduated. I just about didn't make graduation. I'll get into that a little later on. I was a chopper for grades 10 and 11, and in grade 12, I was a Marauder house leader. So I want to share some screens with you. I'm not familiar with Zoom. We use Microsoft Teams here, so hopefully I can get this figured out. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, good. So as I mentioned, I'm from the class of 2000. As Rob mentioned, I'm married with 2 children, Carly and Liliana, and I am a grade 2 teacher. I do have a Saulteaux background. My dad is Saulteaux and my mom is Cree. So my dad's from here, from Muskowgan, and my mom is from the Daystar First Nation, which is just down the highway. Excuse me. So I want to start by talking about my childhood. I think it's important to have a little bit of background information on who I am and how I was raised. So I'm from Muskowgan, and as you can see, I have a little map down here to show you where Regina is, and we're just kind of south of the Yellowhead. Up in the top right corner is a historical picture of Chief Muskowgan himself, and down here in the bottom, we have some of our former students who were participating in a just to bring awareness to drug use in our community. So just to start about my upbringing, I was born in Regina. I lived in several different communities. I lived in Regina, Fort Capel, Lestock, but Muskowgan First Nation has always been my home since I was about grade 2. And the reason being for us bouncing around was my mom was in university and becoming a teacher. My parents have been married for the last 38 years. And as Rob mentioned, she is now the principal here at the school I work at. So that's something really unique. And I really enjoy working alongside my mom. And I have a little story to share about her a little later on. I have one older sister and one younger brother. So we're all very close in age. We're about a year apart, a year and a half apart. My parents did the best they could with everything they had. You know, we weren't very rich. We weren't a rich family financially. We did find our riches in other ways. We live next door to my cookum. So my cookum is my grandmother, and she had a huge hand in raising us. Huge, and I mean huge. Like, she was basically like a mother to me. So when my parents weren't home, I was often there with my cookum, back and forth between my house and my cookum's house. And she was literally next door. Like, I'm talking 200, 300 yards away from us is where her house was. And when I was a child, we never had any internet or satellite TV, cell phones, none of that. So we were outside. We were outside all day from the time we woke up basically to the time we came inside. I mean, at the end of the day when it was time to come in for supper. Um, and for us as kids, it was better for us to be outside than for us to be inside, because if we were inside, we were stuck doing chores and no one wanted to do chores. So we played outside all day. You know, we'd ride our bikes, we'd play in the bush, we would find something to do, find something to play with. Um, and that was my entire world. So um, that was my whole entire world, was from my cookum's house to my house and playing outside. And I had an abundance of cousins to play with. Um, there was more than just one family living under my cookum's roof. There was, you know, I had several aunts and uncles that lived there along with their children. And I mean, it was a small house. It was a 3-bedroom house, but they made it work. We had our house just down the road a little bit. When I was in grade 10, I decided I wanted to um, go to Notre Dame. I'd heard about it from a friend who said she was going to go, Kelly Aiken. And I said, okay, I'll ask my mom. And of course, my mom said no. She kept saying no all of grade 8. I begged and begged, and she kept saying no. And I never knew why she was saying no. I didn't know if it was because she knew I would get lonesome, or if she knew like it was a boarding school. Um, you know, I didn't know if there was some kind of what her reasoning was. So so that was my childhood, you know, growing up there with my grandparents and having my cousins and everybody around us. Um, the next slide I'd like to show you is learning who I am. So I want to start by saying, first and foremost, I am not an expert when it comes to First Nation culture. I am by no means an expert. I was not raised in a cultural home. My cookum was a devoted Christian woman who attended full gospel churches. And that was how I was raised. I was raised going to tent meetings with her in the summer, you know, house services in the winter. We listened to Bible stories. We watched, I mean, we didn't have TV, but we had VCRs, and she would buy Bible cartoons for us to watch, Bible stories that were on cartoons. And so that's what we did. That's how we were raised. She taught us the importance of prayer. But even so, she still spoke the Soto language. She would speak to us in Soto every single day. And um, even though I cannot speak Soto, but back then I was able to understand everything that she would tell us. You know, she would tell us to go and wash the dishes in Soto. And I always understood what she was saying, but I could never reply, as English is my first language. We never attended ceremonies or powwows. We didn't do feasts. We didn't do any of that. You know, I would maybe attend a powwow once a summer, just to go and walk around, chase friends around, whatever. But I never understood the significance behind the ceremonies or powwows or anything like that. I did not understand my culture until I became an adult. So, you know, now fast forward to being 15 years old and deciding to go to Notre Dame, I had no idea what to expect. I was this little naive girl that was basically leaving the reserve for the first time. And in a sense, I guess it was a culture shock for me. And, you know, pardon my ignorance, but I'd never been around so many white people before that in my entire life. You know, I grew up on Muskowgan. I went to a school where 95% of the other kids were First Nation, if not higher than that. Um, so when I got to Notre Dame, and I, you know, I kept an open mind, and it's not that I'd never been around white people. I mean, we went to Regina, we went on family vacations and things like that, but to to be with them day in, day out, it was very different for me. And I was still really trying to figure out who I was, what my identity was. And So my grade 10 year started off with a lot of tears. I'll be honest, it started off with a lot of tears. I was very lonesome up until Thanksgiving. And my cookum had told me, you finish what you start, my girl. You don't quit, you finish what you start. So I did. I continued on with my grade 10 year. I finished it and I said, nope, I'm not going to come back next year. I'm going to finish out my year and that's it. But then by the end of grade 10, I started to get a little bit more confident being there. I wasn't as lonesome. I was making friends. I was doing things and decided, okay, I'm going to go back for grade 11. I'm going to go back. I'm going to try grade 11 out. So I did. I went back for grade 11. And it was a much better year. Grade 11 was way more confident in my grade 11 year. So here's some little bit of a couple pictures of my time here at Notre Dame. So I attended from 97 to 2000. Grade 11 was also the year that I took Native Studies. It was my first ever Native Studies class. I was very excited about taking it. And if I'm not mistaken, it might have been the very first time it was offered at Notre Dame. I was so excited to learn about Native culture, or so I thought. There was maybe 10 or 12 of us in that class. There wasn't very many. We had the option between Native Studies or history. And so, of course, I chose Native Studies. But as I reflect back on it, and, you know, to put it nicely, the class was actually a joke. It was a free time social hour for my classmates and I. We watched CBC clips. We watched the National Aboriginal Achievement Awards for about a month straight. We watched videos on the Oka crisis with no connection to it, not understanding what it was and why we were learning about it. We may have covered treaties, but then again, it wasn't really a teaching. It was the opinion of our teacher. And we never had any guests. We never had field trips. We never had any kind of land-based learning. There was nothing. And I ended up coming out of that class with about an 80%. And to this day, I still have no idea where I got that mark from. And then the class wasn't offered again in grade 12. So that was my time at Notre Dame. I graduated and then I went on to university. But before I made it out, I had my grade 12 year was probably the most rockiest year. My cookum passed away that year. Just give me a minute. So that's why I didn't make it through. It was very hard losing her. It was like I lost my own mother that year, and I struggled. I did everything I could to not be a part of life I wanted to give up. And I tried taking my own life that year, and I remember when I was sent home and I had a conversation with my dad, and he told me not to give up. He said, this is not what your cookum would want. So I didn't. I went back. I finished it off. I finished off my year. And to this day, I actually owe it to Pat Vigneron, who helped me complete the last of my assignments. That would give me the credits that I needed to receive my high school diploma. Oh, sorry about that. I didn't think I would get so emotional. So February is a hard year for us because that's the year that we lost her. And then, so anyways, I did manage to finish. I applied to the University of Regina. I had no idea what to study. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'd gotten there, I'd met with the advisors. They told me, oh, we have this course, this course, this course. And so I ended up jumping around into everything. I went into journalism, got into the J school. I didn't realize how difficult it was, but I got in. Then I said, nope, this is not for me. I went into arts, and then I applied to social work. Nope, this is not for me. I always knew deep down that I wanted to become a teacher. I tried education, and I guess I just hadn't applied myself at that time. I wasn't focused on committing myself to my studies, and I ended up just kind of working towards an arts degree. And my advisor had told me that I was working towards getting my degree in Indigenous studies. So I said, okay. So I started off with a class. And when I first started my first Indigenous studies class, I thought, well, I don't know if I want to do this. This doesn't seem like what I want to do. Thinking back to my high school experience with Native studies, it just didn't feel, I just didn't feel that it was what I was meant to study. But I took one class, and then I took another class, and then I took another class. And I was starting to fall in love with learning about the history. You know, I learned about everything from the fur trade to residential schools to urban issues, and learning about East Coast First Nations and West Coast, and, you know, just everything in between. And I didn't realize how much there was to learn, and everything, you know, all these things that were happening to First Nations people. I was learning from elders. I was learning from First Nations educators. I was learning from, you know, people that had firsthand experiences. And I guess it was a sad realization of everything that First Nations people had gone through. So I did end up convocating with my Bachelor of Arts degree in Indigenous Studies, and it gave me the opportunity to study abroad. I went overseas for 6 months, and I lived in Australia, and I worked with Aboriginal people over there. And when I was there, I learned their history is not much different than ours. Like, they've gone through basically the same injustices as First Nations people in Canada. The only thing different about their history is they don't have treaties, whereas we do here in Canada. I then decided in the fall of 2009 that I really, really wanted my education degree. So I did apply back to the First Nations University of Canada. I got in right away, and that's when I decided to become a teacher. I studied very, very hard. I studied my little heart out. I worked as hard as I could. I made connections in the education field, and it paid off. I became valedictorian for my class at the spring 2011 convocation. So that was a huge honor for me. I'm now teaching grade 2 here on my home reserve. I've been teaching grade 2 for the past 6 years. I did teach grade 4. I did LRT for a little bit. So that's kind of where I'm at today. So the reason why I'm here today is, you know, not to bring up bad memories, but back in November when a story had aired on CTV News about racist taunts at a hockey game, I don't know, something was, it lit a fire under me. I was sitting in my living room with my husband that evening, and I just jumped up off the couch, and he said, "What's wrong? How come you're so angry? How come you're so disappointed?" And I said, "Well, first of all, this is my alma mater. And to hear something like this about this school that happened there," I said, I'm just so disappointed. I'm outraged. I'm hurt. My husband grew up much differently than I did. He, you know, he was in and out of jail most of his young adult life. He grew up on the streets. And so it didn't bother him nearly as much as it bothered me. And then, so later that evening, we sat there and I shared a story with him that I shared with Rob. And, you know, unfortunately, Notre Dame was the very first place where I had ever experienced racism. So it didn't happen until I was in grade 10, my very first year. And, you know, not to go into specifics, but I had a boy come up to me, and he had called me a stupid um, Indian B word. So of course I was very upset, to be called stupid, to be called an Indian, and back then, okay, I was an Indian. That's who I identified with. And but just his tone behind it and everything that he had said. And I remember telling my cousin Shane about it, and he got very upset. And so we talked about it and whatnot, but it just triggered something within me when I heard about that, and I thought, I can't believe things like this are still happening. um I went to my mom the next day, who, as you know, is our principal, and she likes to push me out of my comfort zone. She likes to have me doing things that, that I normally wouldn't do. And so she asked me, "What are you going to do about it?" "Well, I don't know. What can I do about it?" I said. And she said, "Oh, I think you know. I think you know what you can do about it. You need to do something. If it bothers you that much, you need to do something." So it took me a while before I got the nerve up, and I emailed Rob, and I told him how it bothered me, and that there's no room for racism in our daily lives. And so I remember listening to an elder once, and he said that as First Nations people, we must not feel oppressed by society, but we need to start rising up and be better. So if you're not familiar with First Nation history, I urge you to find someone to share it with you. And I can share that with you today, but that would be 4 years of my university life and then some, and I just don't think we have the time. Um, so when I went to university and I learned all these different things, I started to become really aware of who I was, and I started to become really proud of who I am. And so, I have some questions for you today to challenge you a little bit. I was very, very proud when the young girl got up and she mentioned the land that you live on, because 20 years ago, that didn't happen when we were at Notre Dame. I didn't even know which treaty land I lived on when I was in grade 11, grade 12. So, like, do you know which treaty land you live on? Do you know which First Nations are close to you? And unfortunately, in Wilcox, there's not very many First Nations that are around Wilcox. But if you go to Regina, there are so many First Nations reserves that are around there. The word reconciliation, 15 years ago, I had no idea what that word meant. 10 years ago, I didn't know what that word meant. Um, do you understand what treaty rights are? I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've heard things like, "Oh, she's an Indian, she gets things for free." And that's not true. Like, if you truly understood what treaty rights were, um, or the year Treaty 4 was signed. How many of you know which year Treaty 4 was signed? Or the difference between a status First Nation and a non-status First Nation? Because there is a difference. Or the significance that residential schools have played on First Nations people. Have you heard about MMIW? These are things that I didn't know back then, that I did start to learn through my university career, and even now as an adult. And when I look back on it, and I realize the impact that residential schools have had on our First Nations people, I truly believe that was the reason why my parents never wanted me to attend Notre Dame. So these types of questions are actually things that I teach my grade 2 students who are 7 and 8 years old. I have 7 and 8-year-olds that can tell you what year Treaty 4 was signed. I have grade 2 students that can tell you the different types of First Nations that are around us and the languages that they speak. Like, these are little guys. So if my little 7 and 8-year-olds are capable of learning this, I truly believe that any person is capable of learning this. Um, you know, we talk about the fur trade. I talk about the fur trade with them. I talk about ceremonies with them. I invite elders in to come and see them, to share stories with them. They know they know about residential schools, and actually Muskowgon has a residential school right here. We have the last standing residential school in Canada. And it's actually just outside my one window here. We can see it across our schoolyard. Muskowgon is working on getting it, they've been trying to get it torn down for many years. It brings back a lot of painful memories to a lot of people from the reserve here, but they are trying to get it designated a heritage site. I drive past it almost every morning when I was taking my daughter to daycare, because that's how close it is. It's right there by the daycare. So as I was thinking about what I wanted to address with you today, I want you to think about ways in which you can decolonize your thoughts about First Nations people, or any culture, any race, any like February is Black History Month, right? And February is also First Nations Storytelling Month. I think we need to find ways to decolonize our thoughts and our misinterpretations. Next time you see a homeless First Nations person, remember that that wasn't their first choice. The next time you see a drunken First Nations woman who isn't raising her children, remember that that wasn't her first choice. Lots of times, even as myself growing up, and I would see a First Nations person staggering down the street, and I would look the other way. And when I started learning about all these urban issues and all of these injustices that happened to our First Nations people, like our Indian Act, the residential school, our reserve systems, our pass and permit systems. At one time, First Nations people were not allowed to leave the reserve without getting a permit or a pass from an Indian agent, and these things happened to my Cookum, like it wasn't that long ago. We had enfranchisement, which is when they gave up their status. They would give up their status to leave the reserve, to go to university, to join the army, anything like that. They would have to give up their status as a First Nations person in order to go and do these things. The white paper, for example, is a document that was created to basically get rid of all First Nations people across Canada. So, we need to start, even though all of these things happen to First Nations people, we need to start looking beyond that. We need to start finding a way to lift up and honor our people. So I guess I'm at the end of my presentation, and I'd just like to say, even though that lots of these things happened 100 years ago, some of it is as recent as 5 years ago. Like the First Nations people are still dealing with a lot, but I'm proud to say that there are more and more people that are standing up for our culture, for our history. They're trying to change the way things are. I, for one, continuously talk with my own children about it. I tell them about things that have happened. My daughter is in grade 3. She's 8 years old, and she has such a tender heart. And when she hears about these things that have happened, and I don't keep it a secret from her. Like when I was a little girl, I know I never learned about any of this stuff. And I really wish I would have. I really wish I would have known that all of these things happened. But for some reason, everything was just hush hush. It was quiet. It was secret. You didn't challenge it. You didn't hear about it. And so now, we need to use our voices, and we need to stand up. I firmly believe that we need to stand together. I'm still on my learning journey of finding out who I am, my identity, my culture. But as I do that alongside my children. I attend feasts with them now. I'm learning my language alongside them. My daughter and I were actually doing some soto together last night. It was kind of funny because my 4-year-old yelled to my other daughter, "Come on, Carly, wisen in," which means to come and eat. So she was yelling at her sister last night from the kitchen table to come and eat. I understand ceremony and protocols. I still don't participate in a lot of them, but I do understand a lot of that. I guess I should have made mention that I did seek out our school elder, who also said a prayer for us this morning before I came on and spoke. You know, and understanding the protocols that I had to do to approach that elder. These are things that I've learned in my adult life. So I firmly believe, as an adult woman, if I can do this, then I think anyone can. And that's all I have to share this morning. So thank you, Miigwech.
Kristi, thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts, and just thank you for your courage to share from your heart, because we need to hear that. We need to hear your story and the story of others. And I'm so glad you touched on relationships, you know, your beloved Cookham, her influence on you, her motivation for you. And even it made my heart sing when you mentioned Pat Vigneron helping you get through to get your grade 12. And then, you know, when you talked about your Native Studies class at Notre Dame, my heart sank because, you know, I'm a teacher, so I pride myself in good teaching and quality content. So on behalf of Notre Dame and today and those from, you know, back in the day, 20 years ago, we apologize for that poor experience you had in that class. And hopefully it was simply done out of ignorance and not any malice. And then I think your message of a path forward toward reconciliation is really, that's where it's at. And that's kind of our mission, part of our mission at Notre Dame. Like, what does what does truth and reconciliation really mean for us? And we're behind, so we're trying to catch up. And but again, thank you. I believe we have 3 students who are going to ask you questions, so I'm going to go to Elena Kruger's, who's in Lane Hall, and I think one of our grade 12s, Jenna Renwick, has a question. So Jenna, there she is.
Hi, Kristi. So as
Hi.
Rob mentioned, my name is Jenna Renwick. I'm a 4th-year hound, and I'm from Milestone, Saskatchewan. So my question is, as a strong female role model, how do you try to empower the young girls that you teach?
How do I? Well, you know, as a First Nations woman, and I didn't start to understand this till I became, of course, an adult. But women actually have a much different role in First Nation culture than men do. And growing up, I always seen like my mom was like always doing the cooking, the cleaning. My cookum was always doing the cooking and the cleaning, and I'm like that in my own family. Like I do all of that stuff too. Like I come to work and then I go home and I do my motherly duties. But I tell my child, like my students especially, that, you know, as women, we don't need to sit back and just, that's not only our role anymore. I think it's important for women to stand up and use their voices and to be heard. And I really see that happening out there. I think it's important that women understand the roles traditionally and maintain those roles traditionally. So, you know, back then a woman was seen as the one to stay home, take care of the home and whatnot. But yeah, I think it's just important for us to keep using our voices. Long ago, it was the men. It was only the men who went out and did those kinds of things. And you know, even today, like you see way more First Nations women who are becoming chiefs and leaders in their community. And 100 years ago, you wouldn't see that. You wouldn't see a woman doing things like that. So our roles are really changing in First Nation culture. And I think that's important for us to continue on with those changes and to support our female leaders that are doing that, to let them know that it's okay to take on those roles.
Thanks, Kristi. Thanks, Jenna. And I think our next question comes from Anne Marie in Kate's office. We have to unmute her. Wait. Dawn, can you unmute her? Or Kate?
Got it.
Hi, Kristi. My name's Annie Niedermeyer, and I'm a two-year hound from Calgary, Alberta. And my question for you is, during your time at Notre Dame, which staff member was most impactful to you?
I'm really glad you asked that question. So, oh gosh. Well, first and foremost, and I'm not trying to get brownie points here, but I see two of them there, Kathy Yanko and Kate McLean. Alice Dumba, of course. Colette Owens, she was my, what did they call them? I don't know. I would go to her house and visit with her, and
Mentor, your mentor.
oh yeah, she was my mentor. Scotty Owens in grade 12 really helped me get through math. And then of course, Pat.
Okay. Super.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
And then I think in Darren Bolak's class, we have Walker.
Hi, Kristi. I'm Walker Watson. I'm a two-year hound from Yellowgrass, Saskatchewan. And my question is, do you have any suggestions to make our campus more Indigenous friendly?
You know, when I was there was this lady that was there in grade 10. Her name was Brenda, I think. And then
Brenda
she was,
Lewis, yeah.
yes, Brenda. And she really tried to advocate for the First Nation students that were there. Like when I was there was a whole bunch from Hobima, and then there was us that were from Muskowgan and a few others from different reserves. And she used to try and get us together and do things with us. And so of course that was only in grade 10, and we went out and did a couple activities together. And I remember she said, I'm kind of like your elder. And I think that would be good if you guys would maybe get in an elder on board with you guys to do things, to have somebody who you guys can use as a resource to reach out, to have an elder, or just some kind of First Nations advocate. I know a lot of schools in Regina, like in Regina Public, they utilize different elders and different programs like that. So for example, like here at our own school on Muskowgan, we do have our own in school elders that come in and work with our kids every day. I think that would be a really good place to start.
Okay, thank you. Excellent
you.
question, Walker, and great idea, Kristi. And I know we're working on that. Kate McLean's working on that. I think, you know, I'd love to hear more, especially your university classes, because again, I think, you know, we haven't learned enough about the essences of the First Nations people and culture and background. But we are a school, so we have to get back to class. So I'm going to call up Chloe. I believe she's in Rhonda's class in McCusker with a thank you.
So Kristi, on behalf of my fellow hounds, we thank you for sharing your personal Notre Dame experiences. We will honor your words by doing our best to implement your wisdom. So will you please accept this Notre Dame legacy book as a sign of our appreciation?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chloe. And I believe your copy is in the mail.
Okay. Thank you.
Actually, Kristi, we're gonna sign off all of the hounds, but I think we'll end with the Lord's Prayer, and then Kristi, stick around. I just got one question for you.
Okay.
So
Sure.
let's end with the Lord's Prayer, hounds. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. Have a great day, hounds. And remember